This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Monday, May 17th. Welcome to Africa 54. We continue to work remotely because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but what hasn't changed is our commitment to bringing you the latest and most important news from the African continent and around the world. This is today's Africa 54. We begin in South Africa, where a private security company that deploys dogs to sniff out illegal drugs and explosives at airports is now teaching the canine corps to detect COVID-19. Hanson checks out the situation for VOA in this report from Johannesburg, narrated by VOA's Carol Gunsberg.
Which of these samples has been contaminated with COVID-19? In this little detective game, a dog named MacGyver never loses. Dogs, with their highly sensitive noses, are proving good at detecting the virus that causes the dangerous respiratory disease. Researchers in Germany and Colombia have found that trained dogs were able to identify COVID-19 more than 90% of the time, the Journal of Osteopathic Medicine reported in February. Training is quick and easy, says Chelsea Mercado of Canine Law Enforcement. It's a private security firm near Johannesburg's OR Tambo International Airport.
We're working with a lab to obtain sweat samples off of COVID-positive patients, and we are teaching the dogs that that is what they need to indicate on by giving us a final sit or any form of indication. The dogs then get a reward, which reinforces the fact that the dog needs to indicate on the target odor.
Canine Law Enforcement says it's ready to deploy its dogs to South African airports, but there are procedures to work out and different methods to consider.
The one is to physically sniff the passengers. In other words, when a passenger moves, he leaves a wake of smell behind him that the dogs will pick up, and they can zoom in on that specific person. That is the one method. The other method of deployment is where you physically ask the passengers for a sample, a sweat sample.
Canine Law Enforcement has trained 5 dogs that it says are ready to deploy to Johannesburg's International Airport. The company plans to train about 20 dogs in total to cover South Africa's major airports. If the pandemic persists, canine brigades could have a permanent place in screening for COVID-19.
The virus is not just going to disappear. So I think it's a long-term process anyway to make sure it's a successful process. And then from there we can expand into other countries in Africa.
Canine brigades trained to detect COVID-19 already have been deployed at Dubai International Airport in the United Arab Emirates and at Helsinki Airport in Finland. For Romain Chanson in Johannesburg, Carol Gunsberg, VOA News.
Meanwhile, South Africa has launched phase 2 of its vaccine rollout on Monday with the aim of inoculating 5 million citizens aged over 60 by the end of June, according to its health minister. Zweli Mkhize said that more than 325,000 doses of the Pfizer vaccine were expected to arrive, bringing the total Pfizer doses up to 975,780. South Africa is Africa's worst hit country in terms of infections and fatalities, with over 55,000 deaths and more than 1.6 million confirmed cases of COVID-19. A group of 55 migrants were rescued on Sunday after traveling on a canoe-shaped open vessel known as a cayuco, 40 miles south of the Gran Canaria. The migrants, who were missing for days in the Atlantic Ocean, were transported to the port of Aguinguin. The cayuco, carrying 54 men and a woman, was located by a Coast Guard plane, according to local media. Spanish emergency service staff followed COVID protocols and gave each person a face mask before leaving the vessel and measured the body temperatures of migrants. The number of undocumented migrants arriving at the Canary Islands have more than doubled compared to the same period in 2020. Sudan hopes to entice investors and secure pledges to pay off its arrears to the International Monetary Fund at a conference in Paris on Monday, paving the way for wider relief on external debt of at least $50 billion. Sudan built up huge arrears on its debt, but recently made rapid progress towards having much of it forgiven under the IMF and World Bank's highly indebted poor countries scheme. On Monday, the French finance minister said France will grant a $1.5 billion bridge loan to clear Sudan's arrears to the International Monetary Fund. Sudan is emerging from decades of economic sanctions and isolation under former President Omar al-Bashir, who was ousted by the military in April 2019 after an uprising. Zimbabwe's justice minister accused the country's judiciary of being captured by foreign forces seeking to destabilize the government after the High Court ruled it was illegal to extend the tenure of the Chief Justice by 5 more years. 3 judges of the High Court ruled on Saturday that Luke Malaba had ceased being a judge and Chief Justice after he turned 70 years old. Justice Minister Ziyambi termed the ruling a typical case of overreach, and adding that government cannot accept that. The ruling was a rare setback for President Emmerson Mnangagwa, whom the opposition accuses of seeking to influence the judiciary. Mnangagwa denies the charge. Service to social media platforms Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram has been restored in Ethiopia after they were restricted earlier on Monday, according to Internet Blockade Observatory NetBlocks. Early on Monday, the London-based watchdog had said in a tweet that network data had showed that Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram had been restricted in Ethiopia. The head of Ethiopia's Information Network Service Agency, Shumete Gizo, did not immediately respond to phone calls and text messages seeking comment on Monday morning. Access to the internet in Ethiopia has been restricted in the past during periods of political unrest. In our sports news, the Basketball Africa League tipped off Sunday in Kigali with the hometown Patriots Basketball Club taking on Nigeria Rivers Hoopers. It is the inaugural season of the joint production between the NBA and FIBA, involving 12 of the continent's best club teams. VOS Id Ligongo has our highlights of the opening game action.
League President Amadou Fall presided over the inaugural tip-off. River Hoopers took an early lead, but the Patriots got on top with an emphatic dunk from Prince Ibe. Not much that Precious Saliu could do about that. Of an assist from Eli Kaje, Ibe was back at the rim with no one to stop him. Rivers forward Taryn Sullivan brought the ball up and hit from 3 just before the half to cut the Patriots' lead to 9. Brandon Costner led all scorers with 20 points. Of a second half miss by Sullivan, the Patriots' Kenneth Gasana collected the rebound and pushed it up court to Seda Sagamba for the score. Sullivan had a nifty bounce pass to Robert Daniel for his 2 points. But the Patriots were just too much with Ibe collecting one of his game-high 11 rebounds and feeding an open Bush Wamukota for 3. Sullivan had 6 rebounds and a team-high 15 points, including his jump shot off a screen. But the Nigerian club never got back in the game. Of a miss by Stephen Hagumintuari, Ibe was unstoppable in the paint, including a late and contested dunk of an assist from Costner. It was the Patriots all over the Rivers Hoopers, 83-60.
Stay with us here on Africa 54 for highlights of all the action from the Basketball Africa League through the championship game May 30th. Would like to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. Our address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, remembering the Voice of America broadcaster who took American jazz to the world. We'll be right back.
All this week on Africa 54, we are partnering with the BAL to bring you the best of African basketball. Don't miss it. Yeah.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Americans are grappling with the guidance by the CDC late last week that if they are fully vaccinated against the coronavirus, then for the most part, they can go without a mask outside and inside. Here's VOA's Michelle Quinn with more.
Just 1/3 of the U.S. population is fully vaccinated, and 1/4 consistently tells pollsters they don't plan to get one of the 3 available vaccines. So Americans, retailers, and health officials were surprised last week when the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said fully vaccinated individuals could go without face coverings, with a few exceptions. CDC Director Rochelle Walensky says the guidance is about individual responsibility.
If they're vaccinated, they are safe. If they are not vaccinated, they are not safe. They should still be wearing a mask, or better yet, get vaccinated.
Some public health leaders criticize the guidance as too abrupt and confusing, since it's not clear who is vaccinated. The Biden administration has said it won't create a national vaccine passport. The new CDC guidance has revived discussion around a vaccine card so that businesses and others know if people have been inoculated. Walensky says the guidance is not permission for widespread removal of masks, but for each person to take their health into their own hands. For the unvaccinated, the guidance hasn't changed, she said. Last week, U.S. President Joe Biden, appearing without a mask alongside Vice President Kamala Harris, described the updated guidance as a great day for America. The CDC's guidance spurred change throughout the country, with some retailers dropping the mask requirement for vaccinated shoppers. Others say they will maintain their current rules as they review the guidance. A union representing 1.3 million food and retail workers said the guidance could put its members at risk.
What we're asking our businesses to do as they are starting to think about the guidance as to what this means for their workplaces is to make it easy for paid time off for their employees to get vaccinated.
Not all states are ready to loosen their rules, and masks and social distancing are still required on planes and other public transportation. Meanwhile, some states and businesses are coming up with novel ways to encourage people to get vaccinated, such as free train rides, pints of beer, and even money, as they try to return their communities to normal. Michelle Quinn, VOA News.
As the worst violence in years escalates in the region, Israel is sending tanks and troops to the border with Gaza and is not ruling out a ground incursion into Palestinian territories. The U.S. says it is urgently working with regional partners in the Middle East to restore calm. VOA's senior diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain has our report.
Hamas militants said they launched 130 rockets toward the Israeli city of Tel Aviv Tuesday evening to retaliate for an Israeli airstrike that destroyed a 12-story building in Gaza City in the Palestinian territories. The nighttime rocket attacks are viewed as a major escalation of an already volatile situation. At least 28 Palestinians, including 9 children, have been killed in Israeli airstrikes on Gaza since Monday, and at least 122 others have been wounded. Medical officials say at least 3 Israelis have been killed, and at least 56 have been treated at hospitals, as a result of Hamas rocket strikes. The U.S. State Department is urgently calling on both sides to de-escalate the conflict.
We are deeply concerned about the escalation between Israel and those launching rockets from Gaza, and we call for restraint and for calm. Israel has the right to defend itself and to respond to rocket attacks. The Palestinian people also have the right to safety and security, just as Israelis do. We are also deeply concerned about the reported loss of life in Gaza and Israel, including the deaths of children, as well as many innocent civilians injured.
Asked about criticism by some that the U.S. has failed to show leadership as attacks escalate, State Department spokesperson Ned Price had this to say.
Well, I would respond to that criticism, Matt, by noting that the United States is doing what we can, knowing that we don't, our ability in certain situations is going to be, in some cases, limited.
With disturbing images of both Palestinians and Israelis running for their lives, experts say leadership and diplomacy have vital roles to play.
This is a very serious situation. It demonstrates that there's a leadership vacuum in the region that's being exploited by extremist actors. Anytime anyone is using violence and launching missiles in a haphazard way, as we're seeing right now with missiles that could hit anyone, Israelis or Palestinians, it demonstrates that things have gotten far out of control, and that I think this is an opportunity for the United States to lean in with diplomacy to try to de-escalate tensions.
Another expert told VOA the U.S. must engage with its ally, Israel.
The United States is probably in the best position to be engaging Israel around this issue. Of course, we, the U.S., do not have a channel, or we certainly don't have direct engagement and channel to Hamas, so there's a role for other actors there as well.
As the Israeli army released video Tuesday evening showing its Iron Dome missile defense system intercepting Hamas rockets over Tel Aviv, experts said countries in the region, such as Egypt and Jordan, also need to use their leverage over Hamas to de-escalate the situation. Cindy Sain, VOA News.
American Muslim organizations boycotted Sunday's White House virtual Eid celebration, marking the end of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, to protest what they see as the Biden administration's support of Israel's violence against Palestinians. White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswara has the story.
Eid al-Fitr is usually a time of joy and celebration for Muslims around the world. But this year, Eid is marred, and not just by the pandemic, but by the escalating violence between Israelis and Palestinians, causing some American Muslim organizations to boycott the White House virtual Eid celebration Sunday.
The Council on American-Islamic Relations has joined other national American Muslim organizations in boycotting tonight's virtual White House Eid celebration due to the Biden administration's increasing and disappointingly disturbing response to the Israeli government's human rights abuses against Palestinians in Gaza and East Jerusalem.
Beginning with Bill Clinton in 1996, American presidents have hosted iftar, or the breaking of the Ramadan fast, at the White House. This year, President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden hosted Eid virtually.
We can see the spirit of this day in the millions of Muslim Americans who make our country stronger every day, including so many courageous frontline workers.
President Biden acknowledged that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict weighs heavily on Muslims around the world.
My administration is going to continue to engage Palestinians and Israelis and other regional partners to work towards sustained calm.
On Saturday, thousands rallied in major U.S. cities, including Washington, New York, and Boston, demanding the Biden administration do more to address human rights abuses by the Israeli government against Palestinians.
We are tired of the killings of the innocent. We are tired of the occupation.
Making Israel's case for self-defense, Israeli ambassador to the UN, Gilad Erdan, spoke to the UN Security Council Sunday, saying the conflict was premeditated by Hamas.
This is not the first time that Hamas has indiscriminately fired deadly missiles at Israeli civilians while hiding behind Palestinian civilians.
Over the weekend, Biden spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Palestinian Authority leader Mahmoud Abbas. The administration has also sent envoys to the region.
The most immediate steps that have to be taken, which it seems that they are taking, is to play a role in de-escalating and ensuring that we do not see this current violence flare up or blow out of control.
Before the violence, Biden had made little effort to restart stalled peace negotiations. Now he is under pressure to do so, not just from American Muslims, but also from lawmakers in the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News.
2 documentaries offer insight into traditional Native American land management as they adapt to climate change. VOA's Penelope Pulu spoke with the filmmakers and has the story.
Inhabitants, a documentary by Anna Palmer and Costa Boutsikaris, shows how Native Americans are restoring their ancient relationship with the land to deal with global warming. One of them is traditional Hopi farmer Michael Koturua Johnson, who is growing seeds resilient to drought in northern Arizona's arid climate.
These are called hatiko, they're brown lima beans.
Koturua Johnson has earned a PhD in sustainable agriculture.
There's so much moisture in the ground. No irrigation, folks.
Science is just starting to catch up to realizing that there can be melding in the indigenous way of doing science and the Western way of doing science, but there is still a really long way to go.
The Blackfeet tribe of northwest Montana is reintroducing the buffalo into its ancestral lands, making healthy meat locally available and creating jobs for tribal members.
Native people had a relationship with wild animals, and when Europeans came with highly domesticated animals, they really changed the landscape to make it fit what the Europeans wanted it to be.
This cattle colonialism, says Costa Boutsikaris, industrialized meat production and contributed to greenhouse gas emissions.
The cattle are not prepared for any climate change resilience. They can't handle drought, they can't handle heat, they can't handle winter.
In North Wisconsin, the MENOMINEE tribe depends on lumber.
We don't have perfect knowledge, we don't have perfect science, but we've always been adaptive. I think MENOMINEE's history has been adaptive to resource management.
Marshall Pecore says MENOMINEEs harvest their timber sustainably, keeping forest and wildlife intact. He says colonial America disrupted Native American forest management by taking away a large chunk of MENOMINEE forests and destroying it through unfettered logging. In Northern California, the Karuk tribe is reintroducing ancient Native American fire management practices to control unwanted vegetation and dried underbrush and to regenerate aging wildlife habitat.
Air attack, Division November, command.
In her documentary, Bring Your Own Brigade, Lucy Walker also addresses the importance of the Native American practice of fighting fire with fire and links destructive fires in California to industrial logging and harmful reforestation methods.
Natural forests are less fire-prone than you might think, and certainly less fire-prone than the heavily logged areas.
And you can see the little planted trees in the background that were then killed by the campfire. There's no tall trees, there's no live trees. So this is a scene of total devastation. This is a wasteland.
Both films warn people must adapt to climate change by learning the time-tested practices of North America's original inhabitants. Penelope Pulu, VOA News, Washington.
This Monday, May 17, marks the 25th anniversary of the death of Willis Conover, the Voice of America broadcaster who helped popularize American jazz worldwide. Mike O'Sullivan looks back on his career and global impact on music and diplomacy.
Willis Conover speaking. This is the Voice of America Jazz Hour.
Between 1955 and 1996, Conover had one of the world's most familiar and distinctive voices, as tens of millions tuned in for his weekly Jazz Hour. Through the dark days of the Cold War, the U.S. government embraced jazz as a way to promote American values, and Conover helped create worldwide interest in the music.
He believed that jazz was an art form for everyone, but he also saw it as being something that was democratic, something where the strength came from a willingness to listen, a willingness to improvise, and he found those same qualities in the democratic system in the United States.
He was close to the greats of the jazz world, musicians like Duke Ellington, Ella Fitzgerald, and Sarah Vaughan. Black musicians were immensely popular, but faced widespread prejudice.
He broke those barriers, especially in Washington, D.C., by producing concerts intentionally, blending people with different ethnic backgrounds into groups to perform in the clubs in D.C.
Conover built bridges, whether touring Eastern Europe or broadcasting from his studio.
Let's hear another example of jazz from Hungary.
He once did a special program just for jazz fans in India. U.S. officials sponsored overseas tours by jazz musicians, and Conover, an international star, sometimes accompanied them. He introduced musicians to new styles and audiences to talents like South Africa's Miriam Makeba.
It's always been a music that interacted with adjacent styles, so it's just evolving with as it continues to interact with what's out there.
Conover promoted this cross-pollination and left a major legacy in the former Soviet Union and Eastern Europe.
People talk about him in Cuba. He's well remembered in Russia, and I think it's a part of his fate is to be forgotten in his own country, but still beloved internationally.
Conover also left his mark on generations of musicians in all parts of the world. Mike O'Sullivan, VOA News.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us in Washington, thank you for watching.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linor Moudou, in Washington every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.